All right, we're back. It's February 19th, 2021. We're here in Studio 3 at Sunset Sound. It's a beautiful day here to be at Sunset Sound. We have a great round table. Studio owner Paul Camerata, musician, legend, Dweezil Zappa.
Yeah, not legend, but musician, sure.
And former staff engineer Peggy McCreary. How are you?
I'm good.
Excellent. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you.
This is home.
Yeah.
Yes.
How does it feel to come back into Sunset Sound when so much work and history and emotion and
Sometimes the smell, it's like, especially walking into this part. I mean, the buzz of that gate, walking through, the slam of the gate, and then here it's just like, oh, here you are. I mean, in 10 years, I probably spent 25,
Yeah.
in hours.
Continuously.
Yeah. I mean, it was nonstop at that time. Everything was, the studio was booked. The blockout time was 12 hours, and then after 12 hours, anything after 12 hours was free. So 15-hour days were pretty normal. You got 3 hours free. So 15, 18.
Yeah.
I think the longest I ever worked with Prince was 24 hours round the clock.
Wow.
And that was kind of scary driving home when everybody's caffeined out, rushing home, and you're going, oh my God, just get me home. I was so tired. He actually told me he went home only because he knew I needed to sleep.
How courteous.
Yeah. Thoughtful.
Wow.
Yeah.
You're from Blythe, California.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Pretty
I am.
happening spot in the middle of the desert, the Hollywood of the desert. What initially brought you to Los Angeles?
When I went to college, I was going to college. I had to get out of Blythe. I was going crazy in Blythe, and
Population 20,000 roughly.
Well, yeah, it was like I was 18 years old, and there had to be more than, shooting up stop signs and running on the ditch bank. And so I went to school in Riverside and realized, and I always thought it was a people in Blythe, it's just these small-minded people. So I went to Riverside and I realized it was just more of the same kind of people. That was just more of them in Riverside. And I was going to college there, and a friend of mine and I went to see a band in Hollywood, and they were all from Blythe. They were musicians from Blythe. And I ran off to Hollywood with a conga player.
Conga player. Okay.
And supported him. Worked at the Jolly Roger right down here.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Remember that.
What was that?
It was like a Tiny Nailers, it was a coffee shop with cocktails.
Yeah, cocktails. I didn't get the cocktail. We had to wear those little pirate uniforms.
Yeah.
And yeah,
that was a popular place.
Yeah, it was. A lot of music people. And David and I met Frank DiMedio over there.
Really?
To design Prince's board. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So it was kind of the happening place. I can't remember the name of the building now, but it had a bunch
I think it's a CNN building.
music offices upstairs.
On Cahuenga.
Yeah. 2000, I can't remember what number it was, but so I was working there and learned the hard way that you don't wear a short skirt walking home to your apartment up on Whitley and Franklin.
Sketchy.
Oh my God. I didn't realize that, if you wore shorts here. I grew up in a bathing suit and cut off shorts. That's what I wore 5 months out of the year. And maybe some flip-flops or barefoot.
Because it was 112, right?
Yeah, 120.
Yeah. 120.
120.
Yeah.
And I came here and wore shorts, and I had never seen the attention that everybody thinks you're a hooker. I mean, seriously, they pulled over all the time. I got grabbed on the street. It was like, oh my God. Yeah, it was really frightening to me being a small town girl coming to Hollywood.
Well, that doesn't sound good at all.
No, it was. It was actually the first time in my life I ever felt normal. I looked around and I went, I'm fucking normal. When you look around Hollywood, you're like, you're okay. I felt very normal, and I never felt normal in any place I lived before that. So that's kind of frightening, I think.
Well, you found your place.
I found my homies.
Yeah.
Was that your first job in Hollywood?
It was my first job in Hollywood.
And then you worked at the world famous Roxy, which is owned by the Adler family.
Yeah.
Still to this day, Nick Adler owns it. And
I was sick of that job. I ended up some stupid jerk in a polyester suit tipped me a penny after giving me a lot of grief and a huge check, and he tipped me a penny, and I chased him down and blocked the elevator, and he went like this, and I threw it at him.
Here's your penny.
I said, leave
you.
nothing. I can pretend you forgot, but this is an insult. And I thought, I got to get out of this work.
Yeah.
So how did you make that transition to then getting into?
I can't remember. I can't even remember how I went to the Roxy. I just went in there, and because I interviewed for the job, and because I had been a waitress before, I got a big old star by my name. Because most of those girls, oh God, can I say this? Lou Adler's girls want to be actresses.
Yeah.
And then there was Elmer, who...
Elmer Valentine?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I was one of Mario's girls, and we were...
Oh, Mario from Rainbow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mario hired me, and we were workers, we hustled. And the other ones didn't know how to make change sometimes. It was pretty funny. So I worked there and I got my girlfriend a job there, and I worked there for about 3 years.
Oh, wow.
And then, or 2 or 3 years.
Is
And
that
then
the early 70s? Or?
So the 72, 3?
my first show was Jimmy Cliff.
Ah.
And went all the way up. Boss Skaggs did his Silk Degrees. We had record company parties. Those were great because the tabs were free, and we got tipped on them. And then I was there when Bob Marley and the Wailers did One Night, and all of the Beatles were there in disguise. I never looked up. I never saw the stage. I have never seen that place so packed.
Wow.
So the the fire department came in and told Mario to shut it down. He said, "Find me. I'm not shutting down this show."
Wow.
So then I kind of look around, and
That's
I'm waiting
historic.
I'm waiting on rock stars and movie stars, Jack Nicholson, and all those people. And it's like, okay, I'm 2 years old, 23 years old, and I thought, is this it? I mean, is this as far as you go? So I started taking classes. What was this? Sound Masters.
Brian Inglesby? Was
Yeah.
he? Yeah.
And
Because he was an ex-engineer here.
well, there was a guy at Warner Brothers Music that said, I said, I love working around music, and I got an ear. And he said, then be an engineer. And I went, they don't have girl engineers. And he said, yeah, I know a couple. Lenise Bent, he threw her name out at me. So I started taking classes at Sound Masters. And
Was that in the Valley on Magnolia?
I can't
I think North Hollywood? Yeah.
God, I was just working my
I think
butt
that's
off.
where it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I took those classes and during the day, and then I asked Mario if I could help set up the sound and learn. So I was help setting up the live sound during the day, and then waitressing at night, because you learn for free. He was a good old Italian guy.
For free. Yeah. Got to put in your
Yeah. So
chops.
I met somebody that worked here at Sunset. He was doing a show. And he said, if you're serious about this, you should get a job in a studio. And I said, yeah, I'd love to.
That was a musician you met?
No, he was an engineer here. His name was Tim. I can't remember what his name was.
Oh, okay.
But he told me there was a gopher position. And he gave me the number and the address. And I came down and applied and got the job. And so worked here 5 days a week. And then worked at the Roxy 4 nights a week.
And that was what year?
74 or 5.
Wow. Okay.
I mean, you could look at my paychecks. I can't remember.
Yeah, I've got them in my office. No.
Yeah. You could look at my
Yeah,
pay
let me go
stubs.
look those. Yeah, we kept those.
$75 a week.
Yeah.
Hey.
Big money back then.
Yeah, and I was drinking Morning Thunder. I would get up. I'd work till 2 or 3 in the morning at the Roxy, hustling like crazy. Fall asleep, get up, had to get up by 8, be here by 9,
Wow.
work till 5, go home, shower, take a nap, get all dressed up to,
And then work the night shift at the Roxy.
Jeez.
Boy, that's a long day.
oh my God. So I was pretty burned by the time I started this, but yeah,
Do you remember who was training you here?
nobody was training me.
Well, they must have had like a little punch list or something. Like
Well,
Bill did.
I was to take tape inventory
Mm-hmm.
and mic inventory and go around and
Make coffee? That kind of thing?
or run errands. I remember
Yeah.
one of the first errands I did was for David Anderley.
Yeah.
And I was supposed to drive down some god-awful place like Industry City or, I don't remember where it was. I had no air conditioning in my little truck. And I was supposed to go to TIAC and pick up his reel-to-reel.
Oh, off the freeway there. I remember where that was. Like City of Commerce.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was pissed. I was hot. And I remember driving into A&M and I looked at him and I said, here's your tape machine. And I was so pissed. That was awful. I wasn't good at being a step and fetch it. I just really was. My attitude wasn't for that. But anyway. And it was actually him that got me in the studio the first time.
Oh, it was him?
Yeah, because he was, you remember Kent Nebergall?
Sure.
He was setting up a Chris Christopherson record. He was coming in and he was crazy. And he said, Peggy, can you help me? And I said, sure. So I was running around getting his mics, because of course I knew all the mics from the inventory, and stocking him up on tape and getting coffee and all that. And the band started coming in, and it was summertime. And I swear I didn't learn. I didn't transition well from being a cocktail waitress to the studio. So I had on cutoff shorts. And remember those Dr. Scholl's sandals, those little high-heeled sandals? And a little girl's undershirt. And that was all I had on. And I was coming in. Those country boys were coming in. All of a sudden, I just felt naked. And Kent said, Peggy, thank you so much. I bent down. I said, are you okay? And he said, yeah. And I said, okay, I'm going to leave. And Anderle grabbed my arm. And he said, who are you? And I said, I work, I'm here. I'm the gopher. And he said, well, I don't know who you are, but you did really well at helping in my session. And I want you on my sessions. So I said, you're going to have to talk to Bill.
Yeah.
So he went in and talked to Bill, and he came back and he said, Bill said it was fine. And I said, you know what? I'll be here tomorrow and I'll be dressed for the session. So I came in, fully clothed. But oh my God, those cowboys, I felt so naked.
Wow.
Yeah. So that was and then
that's how you get a break from David.
Yeah. And then I just sat in there and learned as much as I could. I made, I printed out lyric sheets. And what did David say? He said, you have studio etiquette. And, that's a hard one to teach. I kept my mouth shut. I just observed everybody. And I knew when they were hungry before they knew they were hungry. And always had coffee or something, it was just, that's the way I got into the studio and just learned all I could.
Did you feel that, as a young person, when I found what I wanted to do initially, did you feel like you had arrived kind of, that this is really, this was still
I was flying by the
job.
seat of my pants.
Yeah.
I was scared to death.
Were you inspired at least that you?
Oh, yeah. I mean, Chris Christopherson was
Yes.
my first album. That was awesome, and he was such a gentleman. And then we did Chris and Rita. There's a whole nother side of him then.
He was married to Rita at the time, right?
Yeah. I don't think things were going real well. And that was interesting. And then we did Rita, and that was a whole nother. So yeah, I did album after album. And then Anderle gave me my first shot at being first chair.
Oh, he did?
Mm-hmm.
But did you already start with the training at the place?
Sort of.
Sound masters?
They kind of showed you what a mic did, and they showed you, an XLR, but I didn't really know that much.
So you didn't know anything about the console or any of the routing configurations?
And I didn't say a word either. I just watched and observed. That's all I did.
And so when you got second chair, were you in a panic or were you?
No, because an assistant they only got tape and, ran, it wasn't like I had to ever sit there and do anything. I could just watch. But, and then some engineers required more, they wanted you to punch in and things like that. So, I just kind of learned. And once I felt comfortable, I started doing it. Then I started editing once I felt comfortable. So it was, like Landy didn't want you to even touch the tape machine. At least sometimes you rolled it back and started it and, did the legends and everything. But I just sat there and observed. And
Wow.
Did you get the full technical workup at some point where you knew, like, okay, I can align the tape machines?
I had to align the tape machines. I learned that and clean them and, all of that. So I was getting the basics and learning, just by keeping my mouth shut. In fact, one of my favorite stories.
Yeah,
Do you remember Eric Benton?
absolutely. Our chief tech.
So I was doing this thing with Prince, and it was 1999, and I had just done crossfades with Anderley on an album. And so I introduced him to crossfades. Well, Studio 2 only had 3 inputs to the wall, or 4 inputs to the wall. Mm-hmm. And I needed 6 because we had 2 formats. We had half-inch, 2-track half-inch and 2-track quarter-inch because he brought some from Minneapolis. So I had 6 ATRs in there.
Wow.
Right? So I was like moving them around and, patching like crazy. And it was like 3:00 in the morning. And it was my suggestion that we do this crossfade. So it was the half-inch. So I pulled all the machines in and I patched them really fast. And we did this crossfade and I cut it in. And Prince sat there and he went, that sounds bad. That sounds wrong. And he got frustrated and he left. And I thought, so I went home and I thought, what the heck? Because I was you had to work fast. And I was his engineer and assistant. Yeah. So when I got home, I went, oh my God. So what I had done when I was putting in the machine is I had crossed the left and right. Oh. So when we crossfaded, it didn't sound right. So I came back in that next morning really early and I repatched and I redid the crossfade and cut it in. He said, let's listen to what we did last night. So I played it and he said, oh, that sounds great. I don't know what was wrong last night. I never told that story until after he died because I knew he'd never forgive me for that one.
Well, it was a long day.
Yeah, it was. But also I didn't know what output and input was. Mm. So I asked very quietly. I didn't want to ever let anybody know that I didn't know very much. So I just kept my mouth shut.
You were the actual recording engineer setting up the sessions, doing full recordings, mixing stuff. But at that time, you were not asking anyone what the input and output was. You're just like, I think I know what this is.
So it wasn't until I asked Eric Benton and I said, so which is the input and which is the output on an XLR? And he said, who always puts out? Right? And I went, well, girls do. So again, I was confused for another few months, never knowing. And
pins.
It was David Leonard that said, I said, which is the input and the output? I had to feel safe with somebody that I knew because nobody wanted me in the studio. I mean, nobody. And anything that I did wrong, any fuck up was
an excuse.
Yes. So David said, out is male, out and in is female. I went, oh my God. So I went for another few months with Eric Benton, and because I was trying to think of his mind and what, instead of, so it was a very sexual kind of thing that he said, but I thought, well, women always put out.
That wouldn't fly today.
Yeah. No. That was very early on. That was the first year or so.
When did you first encounter Don Landy?
That was Van Halen.
Okay, so it was. You didn't know him on any session.
How did you get on that session?
I have no idea.
Yeah. Maybe you were just available?
Yeah.
I have no idea. I really don't.
And you'd never worked with Don before that?
I don't think so.
On anything?
No, you know what it was? It was Kent. Because Kent and Don knew each other.
Yeah.
And Kent was doing something else, so I got on that session.
Oh, because he was busy.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But at what point were you in your career? You had figured out input and output at that point. And so Van Halen comes in, and nobody really knows this band yet.
No, they were so young. Oh my God, they were so young.
You gotta tell us what that was like because it's a legendary time for the studio and the band did so many things here. But what was it like to hear them play for the first time? And you just were like, oh, I got a job today. And then you hear that. I know.
And that's funny because my husband always said, tell me about Eddie's guitar playing. I said, well, he was having fun. And, it's like guitar players want to know everything that he used. And to me, he was just he was really cute too. And, they were just fun. It was their first time in the studio. So they were giddy and silly and fun. And except for David Lee, he was definitely a lead singer.
Now, this was Van Halen 1. This was not the demos.
No, I
You
didn't do
the
that. I think
demos.
Kent did the demos.
Yeah, I think Kent did the
Yeah,
demos.
I
from
think
what
Kent
saw.
did the demos, and then he was busy, so I did Van Halen. And yeah, I mean, they were just a bunch of fun guys. They were all really nice. Ted Templeman was really nice, and Landy didn't require any work. You know, I mean, some engineers required a lot of work. Like they wouldn't even answer the phone, let alone, it wasn't teamwork with some engineers. You were definitely, you know, the step and fetch it on the session, you know.
Right.
But Don was he would prefer working alone, but he didn't work for Sunset. So,
Right.
you know.
So we always had somebody in there.
Yeah.
Do you remember how long the sessions were? We have like roughly a week of tracking.
I think it was a little more of tracking.
Because we had more work orders than
we
what
did.
the urban legend is.
They
It was
were
5-6
pretty.
days.
They were pretty rehearsed because they were, you know, a live band, so they
Yeah.
were pretty well rehearsed. The studio was a whole new thing to them, and that was kind of, you know, that was kind of fun. But
they tracked live.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
They were that good.
yeah, they were.
And then also, they started in Studio 1, but then you remember there was a lot of tracking in Studio 2.
We
For
tracked
Van
in
Halen 1.
They started in Studio 1.
That's what our work orders kind
Well,
of
I'll have to look. But yeah, there
I
was a little bit of work in 1, but mostly in 2.
I got really sick on that session. I don't know if you remember.
Mm-mm.
That was one of those. I poisoned myself, basically. I gave myself food poisoning. You know, I had something in the refrigerator and it was expensive and I ate it and I shouldn't have. And I got really, really, really sick. I was sick for 10 days.
Oh, wow.
And I remember Templeman said, did you go to the hospital? Did you go to the doctor? And I said, I can't afford to go to the doctor. So he paid for it and sent
He
me to
did?
the doctor. Yeah.
Oh,
But
that's a
I had given myself
sweet thing.
really bad food poisoning.
Oh.
And
But you remained on the session.
no, I was home for 10 days.
Oh, so someone else came in?
Yeah, and then I finished it.
You remember who that was? Was it Kent?
I don't remember. Do you remember a guy named Gene?
Gene Maros.
Gene Maros, yeah.
Yeah, he did after Van
He
Halen
did.
2, he did the rest of the
Yeah,
records.
I remember that.
Okay.
So, but I don't remember who.
Oh, so this
took
might have
over
been
for me.
later in the albums they did here. It wasn't 1 or 2 when you
No,
got
mine
sick.
was one.
Oh, it was one
I
when you
only
got
did
sick.
one album. I did the first album, and that's the only one I did with them, I think.
We have some
No, I
work
got
orders
you
from
on 2.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. I know. It was just like yesterday.
You're like, yes, well, I did one and
Well,
two.
you know what's
yes, I do
funny
remember now that you've mentioned.
It wasn't
Yeah.
my kind of music. You know what I mean? It just it was like, rock and roll just bombards you. And although, you know, it just wasn't my kind of music. I mean, I could appreciate it, but
No, I know. It's just
and that
different
might
style.
it's exhausting. And you listen to it for 15 hours a day, it's exhausting, you know? I mean,
So before the band ever became known to the world, nobody really knows them. They come in, and your interpretation is this music is exhausting.
no, they were really good. They
Yeah.
were very good at what they did. And Eddie
Yeah.
was a dream to watch. And they always had a lot of fun. So it was a fun band. I'm not saying that, but you know, if you want to pick out music and have me dissect notes and, you know, stuff like that, it's like, yeah. No, it was just another session.
Had you seen them at the Roxy or anywhere around Hollywood before? Never heard
I know
of
they
them.
played at
Starwood.
Oh.
And
Yeah.
Gazzari's.
no, and the one on the corner. What was the one on the corner of
Whiskey?
Sunset? No, it wasn't was it the Whiskey?
Yeah, they did shows.
So
at the
there was a
Whiskey with
Rainbow,
Marshall Burrell.
Roxy, and then at the very end
Wix-
of the block was
Whiskey.
It was Whiskey. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
I knew they played the Whiskey, but they never came to the Roxy.
Okay, so then for Van Halen 2, I do have a few questions about Van Halen 1, but for Van Halen 2, Don didn't request you to come back and be the assistant.
They might
or-
have. By then I was engineering,
Yeah.
you know, and I was really busy. When Prince was here, I was his. I mean, day and
Yeah.
night, weekends and forever. I never saw the light of day when Prince was here. And
Van Halen 2 would have been 78.
Yeah, that was prior to Prince.
was
Yeah.
it?
Yeah.
5 years.
Well, who was I
yeah.
working with then? Dear
I
God.
don't know. Do you remember when you started working with
Anderle?
Fogelberg?
Oh God, Fogelberg.
Remember? And then
I did 3 or 4 albums with him.
Yeah, I know. With Marty Lewis.
Yeah.
And then obviously you worked on some Toto.
Oh yeah, Toto.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you work on just 4 or did you work on Hydra?
No, I just worked on 4.
4. Yeah.
I got fired.
I got fired.
Yeah.
Oh,
I
Didn't
got.
know that.
You didn't know that?
No.
And that was a whole guy kind of thing that happened. And so they told whoever was the manager, the Tootie or Bill, that they didn't feel like they could fart around me, but that wasn't what it was. And they can fart. I didn't like the married guys.
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow.
I didn't think it was right.
Yeah.
I didn't think it was funny. I didn't think it was funny.
Right.
So yeah, that rock and roll stuff didn't, this is work. Let's do that. Let's not do that in the studio. So.
Did David Lee Roth ever hit on you?
No. But I hit on Eddie.
Good to know.
I tried.
Eddie.
I talked to him. I hope you can cut this out. I talked to him years later. He and Don Landy called me when David and I were living in Laurel Canyon. I don't know if I was married yet or not, but I said, how come? I was really blatant. I mean, I never was like that. I never took anybody home from this place. That was a thing that was rough. But I was hot for him. Oh, my God. So I said, would you like to come over and drink some tequila? And he said, yeah. And then he got real weird. And I guess Ted Templeman had said, nobody touch her.
Oh.
And I didn't
Hands
know that.
off.
Yeah, I didn't know that. He cock blocked me with Eddie.
Good one.
He was the only one I was interested in, David Lee Roth. But yeah, I liked Eddie a lot. Yeah, I thought he was really cute.
I do want to try to spike your memory a little bit on that session of Van Halen 1. Do you kind of remember the professionalism in the room of the guys, or was it a party? Were they drinking? Was it
There
really
wasn't
focused
drinking.
in?
No, it was music. It was all music. And Teddy and Don, Teddy was pretty level-headed then, I know he went off the rails a little later, but he was pretty business.
Yeah,
then.
him and Don.
Him and Don were. And
Production
Don was really straight.
Yeah.
And so all of us were actually at that time.
Paul mentions that Don was a big helper on the studio creatively. Like he was
He
a genius
was
about
so smart.
Yeah, that's what I recall about Don is that he was one of those go-to engineers that worked here. George Massenberg was probably the first, then Don, to how can we improve this place?
Right.
What should we get? What piece of gear? Is there anything you would suggest with the consoles, the tape machines, or and he was very helpful.
Yeah,
and
Don
always
was really
more than
good.
willing to just be a big help to Sunset Sound.
Yeah, he was really quiet. He would never,
Really quiet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He would never impose his opinion on you. But if you ask him, he was a really smart guy.
Yep.
I really liked him a lot. I gave him shit for that weekend because we remixed the whole album in a weekend. I think he knew
Which
exactly.
one, Van Halen 1?
Mm-hmm. And
that was without Ted?
that was without Ted. It was just
Was
both.
anybody at the band there?
No, it was just the two of us.
Wow. I wonder how he got around Ted doing that.
He just said he needed to do this and he just needed to concentrate. So it was a whole long weekend of just remixing. Wow. And when there's cameras not rolling, I'll tell you something that he said that made me laugh. But anyway, I told him, I said, all I want in life is a color TV with a remote, because I was so poor. All I had was this little TV that I would lay on bed and watch TV like this. So after that weekend, and I gave him such shit, he came to my house with a color TV.
Did he?
He did.
Oh,
He gave me my
how
first
sweet.
color TV.
Wow.
Yeah, it was really sweet. He said no remote. Remotes were expensive then, but at least it was color.
But you had your color.
I did.
So I want to explore that a little bit, though. So you get a call at home, and it's Don, because we have other people who have came in on the show and said that Don would kind of sneak away from Ted, and obviously on the Fair Warning session. But he called you up and said, "I want you down at the studio and help me remix."
I don't
Van Halen
remember.
1.
He probably he didn't call me directly. He probably called the
Just
studio.
booked it and
yeah,
yeah.
and requested me.
And then Ted wasn't there.
No. Yeah.
Wouldn't Ted know?
He might have known. He
Or
might have just
afterwards.
asked that he
Yeah.
wanted to do this by himself, I mean, he needed to concentrate. It's hard to concentrate when there's a lot of input and energy around,
Other
But
people.
and he needed that quiet. And, the guys were young and enthusiastic, and
I
there was a
wonder
lot
if
of
that
energy.
mix got. I wonder if that's the actual mix that got released. Yeah. Oh, okay.
Wow.
Well, I'll look at the work orders.
Yeah.
A little later, and I'll look at the dates because it shows them coming back in and doing mixing later, and I always kind of wondered about that.
That was it.
It was like, what? What's that?
Yeah, that was.
They already mixed it. Why are they mixing it again? I didn't put that two to two together.
Yeah. He wasn't happy with it.
I've got a question for you about that mixing process, because those records are so well known by guitar fans, music fans, and they go over all the little details of every little thing that happened. And so famously, the guitar is in the left speaker, and then you have the reverb. It's a stereo chamber, I'm assuming, that was used. So there's a little bit of reverb on each side, but you sense the guitar on the left mostly, and then the ambience on the other side. And Edward himself was saying that he didn't really like how that turned out, because if you were riding in a car, you didn't hear him properly on the right side.
Technically, some of the stuff that we did, no engineer would do, because you couldn't do that. But we did it. I was always say, well, let's try, I mean, I didn't know enough technically to say no, that it wouldn't work. So we just did stuff and tried stuff. We just tried stuff. And if it worked, it worked.
Yeah, well, that's pretty much it. I mean, a studio is a sound laboratory. It's like a creative space. So why not do it? I know at a certain point when studios were first in operation, especially like in the UK, like you had to wear a lab coat and be very, very proper and specific.
Well, that changed.
And nothing could go in the red. Nothing could be overloaded.
And that's English too. You know? But what's interesting is somebody said that tape saturation was part of Prince's sound. And I never would let him go by the meters. I said, go by your ears. I mean, just if it sounds good, then go for it. Don't watch those meters. Don't pay any attention to those. And I'd pull the stereo monitor down a little bit so that they wouldn't,
If we just jump back to
Eddie,
the Van Halen 1 session, the mixing session. So when you went in with Don to mix Van Halen 1, it was just the two of you. You had seen a lot of the recording. You said you were sick, so you might have missed some of the...
I might have missed some of it. 10 days being sick from the studio. I never took 10 days off, not even for my wedding.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm looking at the dates here on Van Halen 1, and I see that actually Kent did a couple of days.
Yeah.
Jim Isaacson did a day or two.
Yeah.
And Corey Bailey. You remember him?
I remember Corey.
Yeah. But I see where we're moving around here on the mix. So you originally did the mix like late September, early October. Then
In 2, right?
In Studio 1.
Oh, okay.
Studio 2, they started the mix in Studio 2 in September. And then you guys moved over to 1 and we're doing some mixing through September. Or through October, actually. And then it stops, and then he comes back, Don, and does a mix in Studio 2 in December, late December. I'm thinking that's maybe that weekend thing, that when he remixed the record.
Was it how many days?
2.
Yeah.
Just like you remember.
Mm-hmm. But I remember it as Studio 1.
Well, you said Studio 2 and before, and then...
I mean, it was mixed in 1, but then I don't know what they used out of 1, and then it's back to 2 mixing.
Well, I had never seen Don struggle, and he was struggling with those mixes, and I think that's why we went to 1 and did the mixes. Yeah. I just remember a lot because you couldn't do anything for Don. He had it all timed down with the rewind and everything. I said, what can I do? And he's like, nothing. So I sat in that lounge for kind of hours and days, with my feet up and just fed him. And, I mean, if there weren't any microphones to change or get or
just babysitting,
you know? So, and then he wasn't happy with it. I just remember he just was really unhappy with it. And
so he came back in to do the full remix. You helped him set things up and he starts going after this sound that became a legendary album. Now, for me, it's just really interesting to know that you were around during the recording and to wonder, okay, what was it like? What was the energy in the room like? You were saying they were happy, they were having fun, it was new to them. And
they were young. And, the first time in the studio, older, you come in and it's like, okay, here we go again. But these guys were just so happy to be in the studio. It was so cute. And the energy was great, They were really excited. Everybody was excited.
And they just did everything quickly too, right? There were very few extra takes of things. They just seemed to capture it pretty much out of the gate. And well, getting back to the mix though, once everything was done, the final picture that we all get to see, the audio movie for our ears, we have the guitar on the left and the ambience on the right, and the whole thing became this legendary idea of, okay, that's how you have to get this special Van Halen sound. But what really were the ingredients that went into it from the day that it was recorded? Were you listening that way with the chambers set up like that? Was that part of the sound from the beginning, or was it really dry in the beginning and then they added that later?
They added it later, but I think that's just the characteristic of Sunset too. I mean, that was the thing. Our live chambers were amazing. And I think that, and also our boards, there was no, you could put sound back through them and you got what you put down on tape.
Super clean.
Yeah. And that was what was, I loved Sunset for that. I mean, that was what it was, you could really capture a great sound. So I think that was one of the reasons that he came back here to try different chambers. Does it say what we had? Does it say our equipment?
I saw something on there.
Very little on, back in those days, not much documented.
In the notebook where it has all the pictures, that's the thing that you may or may not remember. There's these notebooks where the engineers would have to draw a picture of how everything was set up. And that was the only way that you could kind of do a recall. So some apparently you drew the picture of how it was set up in the room. But one of the pictures shows that there was a mono delay going to the chamber. So I'm assuming that was something to do pre-delay or some stuff. But the super Van Halen nerds, they want to know.
I know they do.
They want to know, like, okay.
I wish to hell I would have paid a lot more attention and taken notes. But, I was just after something else when it came to Eddie than his sound.
Well, it was only 44 years ago.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
How long?
44.
Oh, fuck. Are you kidding me?
43.
Well, 77, 21, 44 years ago.
Now, what I want to know, though, is when it came to certain songs, like, were you there for Eruption? Did you hear him playing that? Because
the big guitar solo song.
It's the unaccompanied guitar solo. And the legend is, and this is partially from Ted's book and other things, people who kind of were around at the time, was that Ed and the guys were just playing because they were practicing for a gig that they were doing later that night. And they just happened to be recorded by Don. Don had the tape rolling. They didn't really know that they were being recorded. And Ted even walked in and said, "Hey, are you catching this?" Because this solo that Ed plays, he never played it that way ever again. Eruption is that way for eternity for that one time. And it might never have been captured if Don wasn't paying attention and the mics weren't all set up, because they were just actually rehearsing. And you can tell because that one day when you guys were listening to just the room mics,
the solo room
they
mic,
brought in a tape of just the soloed room mic, none of the other stuff. And you hear he plays Eruption, and then they go into You Really Got Me like it's their live show, which is what they would do. But any sensible person who would have played something so amazing would have said, "All right, I got to go in the control room and listen to that," But they didn't, because they were just rehearsing. Right. But did you ever see anything like that happen, where if Ed played something that he thought was really cool, where he'd just take his headphones off and say, "I got to come listen to that"?
No. They just played all the time. That was the thing, is they were always interacting. It was kind of like the three guys, and then, David was,
the vocals.
But it was just the three guys, and they always had fun playing off each other. It always looked like they were just having the best time. So yeah, I don't remember that specific story, but that sounds right. That sounds, and that's what, for Don to catch it would be perfect.
Well, and that's another thing about working in the studio. So when you saw the way that Don worked with those guys and got the sound, if you were in the room when they were playing versus in the control room listening to what they were playing, how much did it change? Was he capturing just the raw sound of the band? Because having seen the band, I know that's what they do sound like. But people that don't know that much about what happens when you come into a recording situation, so much can change from what it sounds like in the room versus the control room. And Don was really great at making that an organic process, like really just saying, I want to capture what these guys sound like instead of I want to make them sound like something.
Well, no, and that was what I thought that was always my goal. You'd walk out to the studio and you'd think, okay, is this what I hear when I'm in the control room? I wanted that. Don was great at that. And Sunset was also very instrumental in being able to capture that. Go ahead.
Yeah, because that's such a cool part of the process. And I'm just curious for you, like, was that one of the things that drew you to music to begin with? To be able to have that process, the creative side of hearing something and say, how can I get that and make it come through speakers so that people can hear it the way...
Right, and feel it the way... Music is a feeling for me. And that's the thing that I think what happened when we started... Like when I first got in the business, it was run by musicians and artists, And then halfway through, I saw it change. And it started being run by accountants and lawyers.
Business people.
Yeah, it was a business. But I got in the very tail end when it was still an art as opposed to a business. And that's what drew me to it, is that how it could make you feel when you listen to a song. And that's what music has always done for me. And that the manufactured music I can't stand that electric light music. I want to just shoot myself. That's not noise. I mean, that's just noise.
Yeah. Made anywhere.
Well, and they're missing out on, well, I don't know. That's not fair. But to me, what music was it changed your life.
Yeah.
I mean, music changed my life in a lot of ways.
Please elaborate on that, though. I'm actually doing a documentary. We're going around recording studios now with a band, and why it's so important to come to a studio as opposed to. And you seemed like you were about to explain that.
Well, it's interesting because when I was in the studio, it was a job, and I had a lot of responsibility. So to listen and also do my job was not a luxury that I had. I mean, sure, you could listen to bad notes or something, but to actually listen to a song in a situation where you could enjoy it was not in the studio. I mean, and some of the songs that like Prince cut, I never listened to until I went home, and I went, oh my God, those are amazing, but it was at home in a relaxed situation that I was able to actually take it in, because there was a lot of responsibility. You were talking about, I was responsible to you guys. I was responsible to the record company, to the artist, to everybody around the artist.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, do you remember Mike Utley? He was a keyboard player for.
I remember that name.
Yeah, he was a keyboard player for Chris. Sweetest guy. He played with Jimmy Buffett too, but he didn't recognize me at a party. He actually did not recognize me.
Because he couldn't work together with a social
Because my
aspect?
face was relaxed. He said I looked like a totally different person.
Yeah.
When I was in the studio, I was flying by the seat of my pants most of the time, I was focused on every detail there was. Because I had to, and especially with Prince, because I had no assistant. I was the assistant and the engineer.
That's right.
And the gopher and the, whatever he needed. So...
And he always billed himself as a producer, artist, engineer. Yeah.
Just a few more questions about the VH1 sessions. There's a couple urban little legends. Like, do you remember a prank that Eddie had played on Ted where he came in acted erratic and took a mandolin and destroyed it in the studio?
No.
There's a story about it where apparently they set it up so that they could have Ed. He's playing something and he gets frustrated because it doesn't sound right, and you knew that he was usually pretty good natured and liked to have fun.
Yeah.
So uncharacteristically, he freaks out and destroys this thing, and then apparently, Ted was freaking out because he's like, oh, what am I going to do here? But then it turned out it was all a setup. He just wanted to be able to do this thing to get a rise out of Ted in the studio. So there's something about that in his book, but there's all these pictures of Ed with a mandolin.
With a mandolin, I don't remember that.
But now it's in pieces somewhere.
Yeah.
Nobody knows.
Well, and I was sick for 10 days, so I missed a lot.
Yeah.
Or unless it was on a later record.
Or unless
it could have
was on
been.
a later
Yeah,
record.
it could have been.
I mean, they were Ted was he was a musician and then he was a producer. So he was
Right.
well seasoned. And I think these guys really, in the first album, they really, respected him. I think later on they kind of loosened up and they were one of the guys. But, in the beginning, it was fun. It wasn't that, but you could feel
Well, he was the ringmaster.
Yeah.
I mean, he was the producer.
Yeah.
And he got the sound
yeah.
on the record.
He ran the sessions.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So I felt that they were kind of young and green, and I love that kind of thing when people are excited about the studio and they're not all grumpy and crabby.
Don't you know who I am?
Yeah. Did you have a sense later on? So you worked on the record, you saw them do it, you thought, oh, these guys are fun, but then it blows up and they become this huge band. Did it ever change your opinion of the time, or you were still like, well, it was just another day?
No, I was privy to quite a bit of that. I mean, you watch people young and hungry, and then Toto is a perfect example. Their first album, they were young and hungry to do it themselves. They were seasoned studio musicians, but they were, ready to take off. And then you watched them later where it's just like, oh God, it's a grind. Studio is not a fun party place. It's a lot of work. So,
but it can be a place that has amazing things happen at times where you just absolutely can't believe that you captured something.
I know. I mean,
it stands the test of time.
And the trouble is, the longer you're in it, how can I put this? By the time you make it, you're so burned out, you just don't even care. I mean, those magical times become less and less and less with your fatigue, and that's basically what it is. You're so exhausted that
makes perfect sense.
Yeah, it just like you're just done, and I was fried after 10 years and 2 jobs and 5 years of Prince, day and night, and records, and
crazy.
He killed me. He burned me out.
Well, one question about that, and then like the psychological aspect of working and being stressed out and not getting enough rest, but also being inspired because there's creative things going on. What's the process like? How do you learn to work with people that could be creative geniuses, but maybe socially retarded? I mean, like they can't
like
actually, like they can't function properly and they don't treat people properly. Maybe on the spectrum. Who knows?
Well, there's a lot of us in this business. I think that's where we are comfortable. I mean, I don't know if I'm on the spectrum, but my mother was. But yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of people. This is a safe. I mean, I just remember that when you came in here, it was like a protected area, and you could get really crazy or you could get really creative. Mm-hmm. And I saw both sides. I saw crazy, crazy, crazy in the studio. And I saw very creative, Prince was not crazy. He was not. It was all work and creative energy. That's all he did.
Plus, he was a real straight guy.
Yeah, when I knew him, he really was, I mean, his songs were nasty as heck, but do you remember? Was it Debbie? Who was the girl at the front, the blonde?
Debbie Prusa?
Was she the one?
She worked under Bill. She was the traffic girl.
No, it was the one after her. It was after Bill, because Prince was working at Hollywood Sound, and they had technical problems, and he didn't like anything technical went wrong. It really pissed him off. So they called here and they asked if we had a studio open for the weekend.
Was that just by chance?
Yeah, because they were right down the street.
Yeah.
So they said yes, and I was available. They said, will you work the weekend? And I said, sure, overtime, that's great for me. And the receptionist up there said, Peggy can't work with him on the weekend alone because there's nobody around on the weekends, There might be a maintenance guy come in and out or on call. She was
worried about it, huh?
She said, he writes really dirty songs about giving head and stuff. And I thought, oh, God. Who is this going to be that comes into the studio? Because believe me, 10 years in the studio, you've pretty much fended off everything. And I thought, oh, God, this is going to be quite a weekend. And in walks this polite, shy little guy,
23 years old.
Yeah, I could barely get a sentence out of him of what he needed from me, And finally, I think we worked about a week. We worked more than the weekend. And finally, I got in his face and I said, you know what? You're going to have to talk to me. I can't work for somebody that just mumbles something. You're going to have to talk to me. So I thought, well, that'll be the end of that. I'll never see him again. And then he came back with 1999. So that was
controversy then.
That was controversy.
Was it?
That's how it all started.
Yeah, and we were just finishing it up. We did a few overdubs and some mixes, and then we were just finishing it up. And I thought, well, okay, bye. I'll never see him again. I thought his music was kind of clever, a little immature, a little juvenile, but yeah, it was kind of,
And it was just him at that point.
Yeah.
No one else was coming
in. His girlfriend, Susan, at the time, Susan Muncie, would come in with him. Yeah, okay. Every once in a while. And
that was initially this room, too.
Yeah.
So the first time you met Prince, saw him, was in
this room.
Studio 3.
Yeah.
And he was very quiet.
Very quiet. I couldn't hear him. It wasn't audible. I was like, so I thought, well, I'll never work with him again, because I was in his face. He had that big lock of hair that hung down right there, and he would just kind of mumble, and it's like, oh God. So I thought I'll never work with him again, and sure enough, he came back, and I worked with him steady for the next 5 years. So,
what do you think attracted him? Because he was at Hollywood Sound for the majority. He would bounce around to studios, but then he made this a permanent place. Was it the sound, your techniques, Studio 3 being so isolated?
I've examined that a lot, and I think, first of all, I think he liked women. And that male-female energy works. It does work. Sometimes it doesn't, but sometimes it does. And I think he didn't really. Women don't have any ego in the studio. You just don't. Mm-hmm. And he didn't have to deal with that male kind of ego. We just did. Susan Rogers used to say we spoiled him. We never said no.
Just did what he wanted.
Yeah, we just did what he wanted. And he liked us. He loved my piano vocal sound, Do you remember that song, How Come You Don't Call Me Anymore?
That's a great story, yeah.
Yeah, that was, he got me drunk. I never drank around him because I had to be sharp. And he told me he asked me what I drank, and I drank Remy at the time, and he ordered a bottle of Remy, and I ordered him something. And I said, no, I can't drink in the studio. And he said, drink it. So I did. And I got buzzed. And we cut How Come You Don't Call Me Anymore. And for 30 years, I looked for that. I didn't know where it was. I knew it was a B-side. I didn't know what it came out on because I didn't buy singles. B-side. Yeah, I didn't know. And I finally found it at Amoeba up in the balcony of B-sides of artists. And I took it home and played it. I went, yes, it was so good.
Yeah.
He was amazing,
That was cut in two?
Two. Yeah.
Why were you guys in two? Was this were you walking around or was this?
I think 1999 was mostly cut in two.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, because 3 wasn't available. I think Toto was here. I don't remember who was here. I think it was Toto.
Toto used to work in here a lot.
Yeah, because Toto made fun of me for working with him. Because I knew all the guys,
really?
And they said, you really work with him? It's like, yeah.
Haters.
Yeah. So remember Lee Scalar? He took me aside and he said, this guy's a genius. And I said, yeah, I know. But, he was an odd person.
Odd bird. Yeah.
He really was. And you know, it wasn't tennis shoes and a sweatshirt for the studio like most of us, you know. I mean, I wore T-shirts and jeans and tennis shoes, you know.
Do you ever remember him interacting much with people around here? I mean other artists.
Like Cher or
on the basketball court? Because I remember him out there.
A little, but he was so shy.
Yeah.
And I remember that was when he was getting popular.
Mm-hmm.
And David was working with the Bangles. David Kahn and David Leonard were working with the Bangles, and they came over and asked me for a song, if he would give Susanna Hoffs a song.
Oh, that's Manic Monday?
Yeah.
Oh.
And it was like, huh. And he did that. David was working with somebody else, and I'm not going to tell you the name, but so I again asked if he wanted to meet her and maybe give her a song. And she was in Studio 3 and we were in Studio 2. And so we kind of set up the meet, and she was walking down that hallway. And
who's she?
I'm not going to say it, but and she was from she's from New York.
Uh-huh.
And Prince came out. He came out of Studio 2 and he said, "Ooh, one of them loud broads." And he went
one of them loud, really? Just that's it.
That always made me laugh so hard.
not dealing with her.
One of them loud broads. Yeah. So to get a song from him, like, he had to okay every note. If it wasn't him that was producing it, so David Kahn had to check out. I mean, he had to approve it before he would let them release it.
Oh, so he would let them listen.
He would listen to everything after
and then okay it, and then David could continue.
And they did a great job on that song.
That's great. One of
really
big,
did a good
songs.
job. Yeah. And I got to work on that too. I got to work on the Bangles because I was finished with him. So I worked.
Yeah, I always wondered if you worked on the Bangles or the Go-Go's.
The Bangles.
Bangles.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he calls back to the studio and is coming in. He didn't do 1999 or Little Red Corvette. That was with Don Batts in Minneapolis.
He did bring tracks from Minneapolis. In fact, some of the hits.
Just those two. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, 1999 he brought two.
Yeah, 1999 Little Red Corvette.
Yeah, and Little Nicky.
Okay.
That came from there too, and you know, because I was always getting contacted when it was 1999 to talk about it, and I said I didn't cut that song. I mean, you know, I did the album, but I didn't cut that song. It was Don Batts, so I didn't take credit for it. But yeah, he brought some stuff from Minneapolis in his home studio. He never stopped recording.
Is that when he had like the basement home studio? Yeah, long before Paisley Park.
House.
Right. Yeah. Well, and David and I designed the DiMedio board for his home.
Paisley?
Or for his home, for a home studio, because we knew exactly what he didn't need and what he
what he liked about this console.
And so we helped design that. And Dave Hampton, who was the technical at Paisley after it went down and then they were bringing it back up, said that was the only board that still worked.
Wow. And that board's still at Paisley?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. DiMedio that was great. So.
Yeah. He's still alive.
I know.
Did he mention, though, initially when he had returned to do 1999 why he loved this room? I mean, obviously we can all figure out that it was the sound, but was there certain things he just worked?
It wasn't like he came in and said, "Good morning, how are you? How was your weekend?" You know, he never even said goodbye.
Let's get to work.
Yeah, I mean, he would come in, make his cup of coffee, and start in on the drum machine, or come out here and play the piano. And you know, it wasn't like chatty. We didn't comb each other's hair and talk about anything. So yeah, I mean, it wasn't.
Was Purple Rain written on the piano right behind me, right here, the 1907 Steinway? Mm-hmm. That's amazing. Do you remember the first time you heard him working on it?
He was playing. He would come out here and play the piano for hours. We'd have a song that we were mixing, and or doing something, and everything was always set up for him to go. You know, the mics and everything stayed. Now the board had to change because it wasn't big enough to do both. So he would come out. He would just stop. We would stop mixing, and he would come out and start playing the piano or pick up the guitar. Or usually it was the piano. He spent hours playing. I loved to listen to him play the piano. And then you could hear something coming together, and it was like, oh shit, oh shit. And
I'm going to be here longer.
And then he would say, put up some fresh tape. So you always had fresh tape. You always had all of his that all the songs that we were working on, and fresh tape, because he would just, all of a sudden a song would hit him. And so I would throw the board over to live. And if he were on the drums, I still have it too. I had a Sunset Sound track sheet that I roughly put my EQ for the drums. And I would madly
get that set up.
Yeah. And he would say, "You're blowing the groove. Hurry up, hurry up." It's like, oh my God.
So back then he was playing every instrument.
Yeah. Sometimes Sheila would come in, once he met Sheila, she would come in and play the drums. And it was nice to see him play with somebody, but he basically liked to just go off in his own head.
And there's a lot of recordings on YouTube now of him just sitting for 30 minutes, just going through Raspberry Beret to Untitled stuff. And the most fascinating thing for me is, like Purple Rain, that's 90% all him. I mean, there's some bass from Brown and Sheila, but I mean, that's him on every single instrument.
He sat here and was playing that song and then stopped and said, "I'm going to make a movie." And I was like, okay.
Oh, that just came to him. I'm going to make
And
a
then
movie.
he left and made Purple Rain. They cut it live and he brought it back. And that's when we started working on Purple Rain.
Wow.
Yeah.
The rest is history.
Yeah.
That was huge.
That was huge. And that was when the bodyguards came and the entourage and the people and the attitude and
the accountants.
I remember his accountant took us out and it's just, it just got so big. It got impersonal too. I mean, that's.
But mostly for 1999, it would just be you two in here. And then when it's in Purple Rain sessions, you said there'd be additional people, but was that only on Fridays?
Sometimes there would be people, and then sometimes there wouldn't be. Like we cut When Doves Cry, just the two of us. That was the longest days. I mean, I think Dwayne showed me the
3
work
days.
orders. It was like,
just
70
Well,
hours.
while you're on the subject of When Doves Cry, why doesn't it have a bass?
That's interesting because I remember he said he usually started with a drum track, and he did with that one, and then he started building, and then it was like, okay, he's fine on his own. I think, so it got big. It got so big. And when there's too much input for me, I just kind of shut down. And I remember kind of shutting down on that song because it just seemed like a wank, just like, oh my God, here we go, the raging guitar and the raging synths and everything. It seemed so overproduced to me. And then I remember as the night went on, it was the last night we were mixing it. As the night went on, things started coming out. And
he's pulling them out.
He kind of unproduced it, if you can possibly do that. And then the last thing he did is he punched that bass out and he smiled at me and he said, "Ain't nobody gonna believe I do this." And he did. And that's and what's interesting is I forgot this until Suzanne Edgren, after he passed, Suzanne Edgren called me and she said, "Do you remember it was 7:30 in the morning and you were just finishing up and you grabbed me and said, 'Come listen to this. This is amazing.'" And it was When Doves Cry.
And she was in here at 7:30 in the morning?
Yeah.
Wow.
And I was just, we were finished and he was, I was cleaning up for the night. And she said, "Do you remember you let me listen to that?" Yeah.
So the other thing that's really interesting about that track is that guitar sound that he did on there has octave divider, and he's playing in a style that in some ways is not that far from Van Halen at moments,
Right.
So do you know if he had any run-ins? Did they ever meet Edward here at Sunset Sound?
I think Prince, it really bothered him too that he was underestimated as a guitar player. And I thought he was an amazing guitar player. Yeah, but he was really underestimated as a guitar player. He could pick up any piece of shit and make it sound good. I mean, he really could.
Yeah, he definitely was a great musician overall and played guitar really well. That particular song is different than his other guitar playing, though. He definitely was
really rock and roll on that one.
Yeah, for some reason, he went overboard with that one in a good way.
I know.
But do you know what inspired that at all?
Well, and I think, too, that's when, there was conflict with the synthesizers, the wall of synthesizers and everything. It was just all too big. And, so he started taking stuff out. And then you have that. I mean, even my sister loved When Doves Cry. I mean, it was a very unique song.
Oh, yeah.
And so I just, it was nice to watch that process, because usually he underproduced stuff. You know, it was very sparse.
Yeah.
The things that we did. You know, I mean, there wasn't that much on it. But that one, yeah.
He just cared about the groove being there, and the technical stuff he wasn't going to do 3-5 takes.
Oh God. And he hated it because on Purple Rain, we had to have 2 machines. And at that time we had that Simpty.
Oh, dear Q-Lock.
God, I hated that thing.
Oh, yeah, that was
You'd push
touchy.
rewind and one to go one way, one to go the other. And he hated a delay. He hated delay. Technical delay, he would just get pissed off. And you could just cut the tension with a knife. So yeah, nothing could go wrong technically, and you could not say. One of my favorite stories is we were doing Purple Rain, and there were a bunch of people. I remember Wendy and Lisa were here, and Susanna was here, and he came out and he said, "I need strings. It's midnight. I need strings." And I went, okay, thinking, okay, so I'll call, an arranger tomorrow morning. And I said, when? And he said, now. And I said, it's midnight. He said, get it. Swear to God. And I went, holy shit. String sessions were like rigid and,
union.
It was union. And boy, if you went overtime, those guys went out on to get their accountants to, invest, because they were going into overtime, I mean, serious. But, so I remember, you remember Chunky, Novi, and Ernie?
Yeah, sure.
They had just done something in Studio One, and I called up Novi and I said, would you be interested in playing on a Prince record? And she said, yeah. And it was literally 12 o'clock. She was asleep.
At midnight.
Yeah. And I said, do you have a cello player? And she said, yep. I said, do you know a cello player? And I said, okay, can you come down? And she came down at 1 o'clock in the morning.
Oh my gosh.
And they played till 3:30. And that was him. We never said no. I mean, you just made it happen. When the creative juices hit, you had to make it happen. And no matter what time it was.
Did he appreciate that?
Never told me. I remember I asked him one time, I said, do you like my work? And he looked at me and he said, well, you're here, aren't you? It's like, oh my God, that's the most you ever got.
That was the compliment.
And I remember Wendy said that too. She just wished once in a while he would say, good job, and he never did. He didn't have that in him.
Do you think, I mean, obviously these tracks are just amazing and the best, but do you think they would have benefited more if he would have spent more time on them?
Yep.
And they could have been even better?
Yeah.
But he wouldn't work like that. Mm-mm. Did you ever make suggestions, or were you just doing what he said?
No.
Because, I mean, you were technically trained and he was not, and you would really have been like a senior advisor almost to him, but no advising Prince, even in the controversy era.
No, and I think, in the controversy area, that era, I didn't really care. But by the time 1999 came around, I realized, he was serious about making music, and 1999 was a pretty good record, I thought, And then it became Double, which he never planned on either. He just kept creating. So, and then in between that, there was The Time and Vanity 6. So I never knew what we were working on. I could tell by who was coming in what we were working on, but sometimes we were working on his stuff instead, and he would bring Morris or somebody in. So yeah, it was just always, just, you were just working away.
Did we have backline then? Or we would have had the rental place, right?
For what?
For instruments.
Well, SIR was down the street.
So he would tell you what he wanted. There would be a drum set always in
He
here,
had
though.
his stuff.
And then
he had his stuff.
in.
Yeah.
I don't remember. I remember the cases coming. I remember his cases coming. One of the things is we had this weird connection that I would dream about him, and I would sit up in the morning and say, holy shit, he's in town. And Dave would say, it's okay, sweetie. Go back to sleep. And then,
Get the call?
I'd get the call about 2 hours later that he was in town. And that was kind of the way you worked. And then I knew my life was his for the next few months. Wow. And then just as suddenly as he came into town, he would leave. I'd drag myself in for another session, put the coffee pot on, and they'd say, pack it up, he's gone. So
Did you feel special professionally that he wanted to work with you, even though he was, standoffish and quiet and aggressive?
No. I mean, yeah, kind of, but...
I mean, I would. If Prince had me on anything or any of that person of that caliber, I would feel like, I feel very special to be here.
Yeah, but isn't that kind of a cognitive, dissonance? Because he kind of would treat you like shit, but he always requested you. So what's that?
I guess that goes back to the answer he gave you. You're here for a reason.
Yeah, but there was never, he was mean. He could be mean.
So on that subject, a couple things. If he's mean, you said before, like in the studio, you saw really creative and you also saw crazy. You said he wasn't crazy, but I want to know what constitutes as crazy in the studio.
Well, there's a lot of things. Like I was working with him when he got booed off the Stone stage.
Oh, yeah.
That would, he got shit thrown at him, and that was pretty bad. That would humiliate you. And he was somebody who didn't share his feelings. So when he was upset, you kind of just had to guess or try to stay out of his way. And I remember one time he came in, we were working on the time, and you could always hear his boots through the courtyard. And I'd have the door open, I could hear his boots, and
clicking.
I could tell by the way he was walking. And I looked out and I went, oh. He had no shirt on, which he never did. He had those pants that buttoned on the side and two buttons were undone. He had a bandana tied around his head and one around each knee. And I went, oh, fuck. He came in with an attitude that he was literally all day long. He wrote me just nasty comments about white people didn't have any rhythm and hustle it up, and just on and on and on. And I remember it was Terry Lewis and Jimmy Jam. And Jimmy looked at me and it was like, so sorry, but so glad it's not one of us, because he could just pick somebody up and, pick them out and just all day long. And he wasn't really horrible to me. I know some of the stuff that he said to Susan was really bad and other people, but I found out later that somebody, not me, but somebody had lost one of the time tapes and he was furious.
Oh, really?
Do you remember who that was?
No, and I don't know who it was. Oof. And it wasn't me, but I got the brunt of that attitude that day. And then he could be really sweet. He'd come in and say, let's go see a movie. And I'd say, oh, no, you go ahead. I'll be fine here. And he'd say, Peggy, I got us a limo. And it's like, what? Yeah. So.
What did you go see?
Oh, it was Diva. It was here it is. I'm sitting here. He's all dressed with a hat and a, 3-piece suit and black lace out of his pocket. And I've got jeans and t-shirt on. I'm riding in this huge stretch limo. It's like, oh my God. And then he sent for me to go on the road with him. Do you remember that?
No, to do sound?
No, it was a 1999 tour. And I think he was an oddity, the way he dressed. He performed in the studio. He didn't just, he performed and danced and stuff in the studio. So I think because he was different and he could read that on my face, maybe he wanted me to know who he really was. So he sent for me, it was a Christmas present. He sent for me to come out on the road on the 1999 tour over New Year's Eve in Houston and Dallas. And I got to stand up at the sound, with Cubby, which is the best place in the house for a sound engineer.
Sure.
And watch him perform. I had never seen him perform.
Oh, that was the first time.
I had never seen him perform. And I was completely blown away.
All made sense then?
It did make sense. He literally made me go like this. It was like, oh my God.
And that was at the top of his game.
Yeah, that was 1999.
Yeah.
And he was playing to his people too. The energy in those crowds were amazing. Wow. So yeah, that was quite a treat.
I have a question from the 1999 album. DMSR, you're credited with background vocals. Mm-hmm. So you did sing on that. Mm-hmm. Is that him forcing you to do it? Or
Of course.
Of course. You will do it.
Yeah. Yes.
Was that in this room as well?
No, it was in 2.
Okay.
And it was Jamie. It was Jamie was her name? It was his two managers.
Cavallo Ruffalo.
Yeah, but it wasn't them. It was
gotcha.
the girl. It was Carol McGovney and Jamie. What was Jamie's last name? I don't remember.
Can't remember.
I want to say Star, but that was him.
Yeah, that was him.
Anyway, we were out there singing.
Just because he wanted a female vocal right on the spot there,
And probably laugh at us. Yeah, because white people don't have any rhythm. I always thought that was funny because he had a white drummer. It's like, He did one time. It was a Friday or Saturday night, and I think he had Jesse Johnson with him, and he wanted me. I think it was 1999 because it was Studio 2, and he wanted me to put some oratones out there, and they brought these little girls in, and he wanted to see if his music was danceable. I think that was the premise on what they came in here for.
See if they could dance to it?
Yeah. They were really cute, little short skirts, cute little girls. And anyway, I set up the speakers, and they started dancing to his music. And these guys were making fun of him. It's ridiculous. See?
Yeah.
And he said, "Go out there and dance, Peggy." And I said, "Yeah, right." No fucking way. If I did this to some of his songs, and how could you not? He would turn around and go. So I just sat there, kind of like, okay, so yeah, you didn't feel his music.
Well,
in front of him.
That was one of the things that he did sometimes in shows. There's videos, you see him, he'll be playing an acoustic guitar and he'll be singing. He's got a great internal pulse, great groove. And then when people start feeling like, hey, I'm going to get in on this, and the audience starts clapping, he goes,
Yeah.
No. That was just pretty funny because like most entertainers wouldn't do that. But I will say that it's weird if you're on stage and you see somebody that's out of rhythm, your brain starts making you go, am I supposed to go to that? Right. But you're playing and you're like, it's like you're falling over because your brain is twisting inside out. I've seen it happen because when I've played my dad's music, which has a lot of odd time stuff and people have no idea where one is, you definitely see like the odd, like, people like they're trying.
I know. And that's, a lot of people don't have rhythm. It's just, you're born with it or you're not, that's, if you watch, some people just cannot catch. I think they could be taught, but you go to concerts and it's like, oh geez, stop.
But I think people don't realize that if you're on stage, you have to look away.
Right.
Because it can totally change. It's happened to me a few times.
Plus there's a delay, what you hear and what you see too. So if it's a big arena.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Now, totally different subject, but I want to know, when you were working in the early days and you're setting up and you're doing things like making sure people eat food when they should and stuff like that, what are the kinds of things that you saw, like the behaviors in the studio? Like, I'd be curious to know, like, what did Van Halen live on food-wise?
God, I can't remember. Yeah, I can't remember that.
Because
I'm sorry.
David Lee Roth was notably always in really good condition, really looked healthy, but apparently was eating McDonald's all the time.
We always ate shit. That was the studio. I think I went. Remember that little burger place down on Sunset near Guitar Center?
Oh yeah, the Sunset
lady
Grill.
The lady had a full beard and shit. Yeah, I used to get food from there all the time. Pink's. I brought Pink's back one time. I've never eaten Pink's again. Teddy wanted Pink's. That hot dog just sat in my stomach. Yeah.
I know there wasn't much choices around.
No, there weren't any choices,
Yeah.
I used to send for Prince. There was a great soul food. Remember Greens?
Yeah.
That wasn't very good soul food, but at least it was close. Poor Mike Cluster. I used to send him down to Maurice's Snack and Chat on Pico and Fairfax.
Oh, that's
they
where
had
he ate
the
from?
best food. And Prince ate Popeyes too. You could get a decent, chicken meal, but Maurice's Snack and Chat was really good. She was a really good
Did they
cook.
have Roscoe's at that time?
They had Roscoe's, yeah. Roscoe's was up on La Brea, right?
No, where was it? Off of Sunset and Gower, I think.
Yeah. So, they had Roscoe's.
But what about people like Elton John?
You know what? we didn't eat with Elton. We drank.
He has a chapter devoted to you in his biography.
Yeah, it was funny because I was working. Who was the Chris Thomas was the producer on that. On this song that we were doing, and it was. I can't remember who the engineer was, but Stevie Wonder came in to play the harmonica solo on. I guess that's why they call this the blues.
Oh, really?
And he had a handler with him, and everybody was real nervous, because it was Stevie, and everybody was all nervous. And so I was sitting at the tape machine. God, who was the engineer?
Schmidt?
No, it wasn't Schmidt.
Bill Schnee?
No, it wasn't Bill Schnee. Anyway, he did the harmonica solo, and he wanted to punch in. And it was that, you remember how the Dolbys had that delay?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, dear God. So the guy looked at me and he said, okay, Stevie's going to do this when he wants you to punch in, and this when he wants you to punch out, which seemed totally backwards to me.
Yeah.
And everybody, you could feel the whole room just kind of go, oh, shit. And he looked straight at me. So it was like, okay. I don't know, is that moment where you really just zen in, and I can still hear that punch to this day.
And you did it?
I did it, and I punched out too. I didn't clip anything, and with that Dolby, you didn't know whether you clipped something until you played it back.
Yeah.
So we got it. Now that I listened to it, the end was pretty big.
Yeah,
It was the out that wasn't, but the end was pretty big. And anyway, you could just feel the whole room kind of go, oh. And I got a gold record for that punch.
We did.
But what's crazy is, there may be a lot of people that are from our generation that know what you're talking about, but there's a lot of people that won't know how life-threatening that could feel to be like, okay, you have a major musician in the studio. There's a performance that exists, but they don't like this one little part. Yeah. And you got to press play and record, to get them in and out.
And get them out,
yeah, but you want to just remove that one bit, which they have to play along to the part reasonably well so that it matches when it comes in. It's not computer stuff where you can crossfade.
Yeah.
So the pressure on you for something like that would have been palpable.
Oh, it's huge. And think of the editing. Yeah. A grease pencil and a razor blade. I mean, Pro Tools, it's like, oh my God, I wish I'd have had this.
Yeah, it's
cutting
pretty
tape.
wild because, technology moved so quickly with a lot of those things. But some of the most classic records didn't have anything close to that technology, and you had to rely on razor blade edits to hear symbols and things like, okay, that symbol is going to, it's not going to work. That edit you can't make because the symbol will ruin it.
I was doing an edit one day with Prince, and I think it was, God, I can't remember what album it was, but he got into editing. And so he said, okay, take that chorus out and put this here and that there. And then he said, okay, now put that chorus. Where's the other chorus that you took out? And I went, I was stepping on
floor.
Because that's what you did is you put this chorus around your neck and then that verse. And then it was like, okay, there's another verse. And, you had to mark it with grease pencil. And he said to take it out. So I took it out and I was walking on it. Oh, it pissed him off. But I did an edit with him one time. And I actually kept it on a matchbook for a long time. It's going 30 ips per second, right? And he said, I was cutting on the kick. Well, that's easy, that's a nice big boom. And he said, no, that's not right. Half that. So I halved it. So it was like this. And then he said, it's still out. Half that again. I literally was taking this much tape out and it was like, I think he's fucking with me. But once we got it, he said, that's perfect. So yeah, literally like taking little tiny shavings out. I think there were 8 of them.
My God.
And I never knew whether he was fucking with me or he heard it.
That's some crazy stuff.
Yeah, it was hard.
Nobody knows that anymore.
What about the process of him getting into being able to handle recording his vocals on his own? Weren't you instrumental in that process?
Well, the thing is, he had a home studio, so he was pretty adept to punching in and stuff like that. So he knew what was going on in the studio. But you can't sing and play guitar and punch. You can't, you can't play bass and punch.
Yeah.
So yeah, he needed me. And so when we were doing that, I can't even remember what song it was, but it was like in the 13th or 14th hour. And I was just I was hungry. I was losing concentration. I was really tired. And we were having to communicate through, space and glass. It was right here. And he was standing out there. And I remember I missed a punch or clipped something. And he went, "You're getting tired, aren't you?" And I said, "I am. I'm sorry." And he said, I need to finish this. And I said, "Well, you know what? I can set you up in the control room and you can just keep going." And he said, "Really?" And I said, "Sure." So I drug the microphone, the U-47 in there and hung it across the console and, pulled the monitor down, gave him some headphones. And he loved that because he created, you don't realize how much a vocal, I realized that with Elton John, how much a vocal is so much a part of an instrument. It's not just lyrics. They're actually making it really a part of the song. And when they stack it and, harmonize with it, it's just amazing. And he could do that without having to communicate his process to me. He could just do it himself.
But it started in that control room.
Right here.
So
I can still see his face saying, "Oh, you're getting tired, aren't you?"
But what's that like to be sitting here right now and know that he was once right over here and you were there? Like, do you have this weird feeling of being like in a time machine where you can just completely go back to that?
Do you know how many years and how many bands I spent in this studio? Lots.
Not just Prince.
Not just Prince, yeah.
That's what I say to
Toto
Paul all the time. Paul always says that. I'm like, "Paul, don't you know that Eddie Van Halen was standing right here?" And I think, they're just artists and they're doing their thing. Some are bigger than others, and it's just so repetitive that it's naturally.
Well, and it's not like you know what's going on out there. If you spend 15, 18 hours a day in the studio, weekends included, the last thing you want to do is go and listen to popular music. It's like, I don't want to go listen to any music, So we didn't really know what was going on out there. We didn't know who was big. I mean, somebody huge, yeah, of course. Or somebody from your past, yeah, of course. But you didn't know what was going on. Yeah. I mean, you went home and took your clothes off and fell in bed. If you brush your teeth and wash your face, you were lucky. Seriously, it was grueling work.
Yeah, you wouldn't be sitting on the beach listening to the radio every day for.
In fact, I didn't listen to anything for 5 years when I got out of the studio.
Afterwards?
I didn't listen to any music. I could not. I was saturated.
That does make sense, though, because a lot of times people say, "Hey, what are you listening to?" I'm like, "Nothing."
Yeah.
You're like, I don't have time for just like the luxury of time to just sit and listen to music.
Yeah.
It just doesn't really happen in modern life so much. It became something that was forced in the background for a lot of people. And if I listen to music, I have to only be listening to music.
Right.
I can't,
Me too.
I just don't like it just being that.
Me either.
It's like having a fly buzzing around the room. I need to.
God, it's nice to meet somebody like that, because I know people that can read and listen to music. It's like, I got to do one or the other.
Yeah.
I got to read or I got to listen to music, but I can't do this both. Do you remember when he brought that bed in?
I remember when Craig went out and bought that.
Oh, he was just in a
bought
tizzy
the
about that.
bed. He was like really jazzed. Craig was like,
Yeah.
"Oh, I get to buy Prince a bed. I went and got the sheets. I went to Walmart or wherever he went. He got these purple sheets, and I remember him setting it up in here, and he was like so proud.
And everybody
I'm like,
was just,
"What is that doing in here?"
I know, and everybody was just tittering, thinking, "Ooh,
go,
rock and roll."
I go, "That's a little creepy."
You know what he got it
It
for?
was in the live room, though?
It was right
It was
here.
right here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
You know what he got it for? For me.
No.
So I could take a
Oh,
nap.
that was for you.
Like I could ever lie down
Okay.
and take a nap.
I
Yeah,
know.
that was
Wow.
for me.
Yeah, he'd be screaming in there for you.
Yeah.
Well, it sounds like at one point Yoko had a bed at Abbey Road, and
I bet she did.
And they just they'd be working, and they just had to have a space for her to be in the same
go to
place,
sleep.
like reading magazines, lying in a bed.
Yeah. Well, I didn't have that luxury because I had to be in here.
You said that earlier that you didn't quite know when he was coming into town. You just get a call. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm trying to think about how he had the studio pre-booked.
Me too. And why didn't anybody warn me?
looking through the invoices, I did find a lot of cancellation charges. So I'm thinking maybe he just block booked the studio open-ended for weeks or months, and like he would come, he would leave, he would come, he would leave, but they just paid for it.
Yeah. Well, think about it. He didn't have a producer.
Right.
He didn't pay a producer royalties. It was all him. It was all going to him.
No musicians.
No musicians.
Yeah.
So it was all going to him. And these big hits, all the money was coming to him.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I remember Ray Parker Jr., I think it was 1999, where he came down because Warner Brothers didn't like the fact that he didn't have a producer and he didn't have somebody watching over him.
Really?
And so they sent Ray Parker Jr. down
to
to kind of watch and see what he was doing. And Ray Parker went back and said, let him go. He's got this. So, yeah, I mean, he was so different the way he worked. I mean, most people write songs and then they have somebody, they collaborate with a producer or an arranger or something, and then they come into the studio and they do this kind of thing, He didn't. It was all in his head. I never knew what we were working on. In fact, Manic Monday, I tell that story. You probably heard it on an interview, but he called the session. We left at, 3 or 4 in the morning, and he called the session for noon. I thought, oh, thank God, I've got some time. I got a call from Craig, 9 o'clock in the morning. He's coming in. He'll be in at 10. I was fucking furious.
Oh, wow.
And I was in such a bad mood. It was like, 3 hours sleep or 2 hours sleep. And I come down here and I'm just like pouting in Studio 2.
You got a bandana on your left knee and on your right
no
knee.
Shirt.
Yeah.
And he came in and you could tell that he was apologetic.
Oh,
but
really?
cocky. I mean, in his way of interacting with you, it was his way of, kind of lightening it up. And he came in and he said, well, I said if I dreamed another verse, I was going to come in. And I went, you dream your songs? And he said, yeah, sometimes. And that was Manic Monday. He dreamed that song. And and I have lyric sheets from him written on La Park, studio. I have it from La Park Hotel, where he stayed sometimes. I have it on napkins. I have it on paper towels. I have his lyrics written on everything, back of track sheets. He just, when it hit him, he just started writing it down on envelopes. Anything he could write his lyrics down. When it started coming, he wrote it down.
Plus, isn't there like dozens, if not hundreds of songs that he recorded here that never been released?
Yeah. I always said that
just
I'd be on his albums forever.
Droves of material.
Yeah. Well, that one, remember I told you I needed a title for a song?
Yeah.
Because you guys needed it, and I was so tired of fudging it, when doves cry for the next, 3 or 4 sessions. So he started to walk out, and I said, wait. I need a title for this. And he looks at me, and I said, it's for the record company in the studio. I get in trouble if I don't do this. And he said, what's your middle name? And I said, Colleen. And he said, write that down. And off he went. So that song never went anywhere. You know what I mean?
It's somewhere.
Yeah, it's somewhere. And I think they've even released it. But he did my birthday song. Mm-hmm. He did, and then he stole the bass line because it never came out until I was so mad at Warner Brothers. It was my song. It was my birthday song.
Well, I'll bet someday that all this stuff's going to come out of archives. And is going to be released.
They released it.
Oh, they did release
on this last go-around.
Okay.
Well, no, my birthday song.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Because he came in on my birthday, and I was a little ticked off that he couldn't at least give me my birthday off. I mean, come on. I've worked with you for years now. You can't give me my birthday off. And he came in. He was totally dressed different. He had on jeans, which he never wore jeans. He had on a white T-shirt. He never wore a white T-shirt. And he had a motorcycle jacket on. In fact, he gave me that motorcycle jacket.
Really?
Still have it?
I sold it.
Oh.
I didn't care. Anyway, and he had on black, high heel boots. And he came in. I thought, well, that's interesting. And he came in. We started cutting this song. And it was a rockabilly tune, which made sense of the way he was dressed and everything. At the end of the night, I made him a cassette. And I gave it to him. And I was, unpatching and cleaning up and taking trash out. And he looks at me and he smiles and he tosses it to me and says, happy birthday. And that was my birthday song. came in. His gift to me was a day in the studio with him with a song at the end.
Yeah, you never had that before.
I mean, to him, that was a huge gift. And it was a huge gift.
Well,
but he never told me till
special.
the very end. So I had a bit of an attitude problem.